In March 2021, Manila was between seasons, too warm for comfort, too gray for joy. I remember the light in my condo that afternoon, flat and a little unforgiving, showing every fingerprint on the glass table. My daughter, Lianne, sat across from me with a folder between her hands. "It's just insurance forms, Ma," she said, tapping the cover. We had been talking about health, about what if something happens, as people in their late 40s and early 60s eventually do. Her tone was sweet, almost rehearsed. I poured tea, nodded, and let her talk about protection, simplifying things, avoiding hassle later. On the surface, it was a conversation about love and responsibility. Underneath, I could feel something shifting, a small, precise movement, like a lock turning in a door behind me. I am 62 now, and I have learned that most betrayals do not start with shouting. They start with concern. That folder on my table looked harmless. The woman holding it was my daughter. But when she slid it toward me without opening it, when she spoke about trust instead of details, I knew something was very, very wrong. So I smiled, placed my hand on the folder, and said the words that changed the direction of everything. "Leave it here. I will read it slowly tonight." Her face changed then. Just for a second. A tightness around her mouth. A flicker behind her eyes. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Because if the papers were really what she said they were, she would not have cared if I read them slowly. She would not have looked so uncomfortable when I refused to sign immediately. And she would not have called me 3 times that same night, asking if I was done yet. That week in March began like any other week in Elena Morales' life, which is to say, it began with routine and ended with questions. She was 62 years old, widowed for 6 years, and living alone in a modest condominium in Mandaluyong. The building was not new. It had been constructed in the late 1990s, back when this part of the city was still developing, before the malls and the office towers turned every empty lot into glass and concrete. Her unit was on the 12th floor, overlooking a stretch of highway that hummed with traffic from dawn until well past midnight. On clear days, she could see as far as the mountains ringing the city. On most days, she saw only haze and buildings and the endless movement of cars. The walls of her condo were painted cream, a neutral color that did not require much maintenance. The furniture was functional, chosen for comfort rather than style. There was a gray sofa, soft and a little worn at the arms. A glass-topped dining table with 4 chairs, though she rarely used more than one. A television that she turned on mostly for background noise. A bookshelf filled with old paperbacks, management textbooks from her working years, and a few photo albums she almost never opened. In the bedroom, the bed was neatly made every morning, the pillows arranged precisely. The closet held clothes in muted colors, blacks and grays and navy blues, the wardrobe of a woman who had spent decades in corporate offices and had never seen the point of changing her style. There were no expensive paintings on the walls, no designer lamps, no decorative objects that served no purpose. Nothing that would make a stranger think this woman had spent 30 years building a quiet fortune. Elena had worked in human resources for 3 decades, mostly in multinational corporations. She had started as a benefits coordinator in her late 20s, moved up to HR manager by her mid-30s, and spent the last 15 years of her career as a senior executive handling labor relations, compensation structures, and corporate compliance. She knew how to read contracts. She understood the language of liability, benefits, and legal disclaimers. She had negotiated severance packages for employees who were being let go. She had reviewed insurance claims that ran into millions of pesos. She had approved or denied hundreds of documents that affected people's lives, their families, their futures. She knew that words on paper mattered. She knew that the difference between may and shall could cost someone their pension. She knew that the clauses buried on page 7 were often more important than the bold print on page 1. And she knew that when someone asked you to sign without reading, they were usually trying to hide something. When her husband died in 2015, Elena inherited 2 rental condominiums in Quezon City, a small commercial unit in Pasig, and the family house in Bulacan where she had grown up. Her husband, Roberto, had been a civil engineer, careful with money, deliberate in his investments. They had bought the first rental condo in the early 2000s, when prices were still reasonable. The second came a few years later. The commercial unit had been an opportunity, a ground-floor space in a busy area that they leased to a small pharmacy. The house in Bulacan had been in Roberto's family for generations, a modest structure with a large garden and a view of rice fields that were slowly being replaced by subdivisions. Elena managed these properties carefully. She kept tenant records in labeled binders, organized by year and property. She paid taxes on time, filed returns accurately, and reinvested rental income into modest improvements. When a tenant moved out, she repainted. When something broke, she fixed it. When the market shifted, she adjusted rents within reason, never greedy, but never careless either. She lived simply. Not because she had to, but because simplicity gave her clarity. She cooked her own meals. She bought clothes at department store sales. She drove an old sedan that still ran well. She did not travel much. She did not buy things she did not need. Her savings grew slowly, steadily, like a plant you water every day without expecting flowers. By the time she turned 60, she had built something solid. Not spectacular. Not enviable in the way that invites attention. But solid. Enough to live on. Enough to pass down. Enough to sleep well at night. Her daughter, Lianne, was 42 years old, married to Marco Santos, and the mother of an 11-year-old boy named Paolo. Lianne worked in marketing, held a middle management position at a consumer goods company, and was always busy. She lived in a gated subdivision in Quezon City, a 3-bedroom house with a small yard and a carport. She drove a late-model SUV, white and spotless, the kind of car that required monthly payments and made a statement at school pickups. She worried constantly about money, even though by most standards, her household was comfortable. Marco ran a logistics and supplies company, sourcing materials for construction projects and government contracts. He was ambitious, always chasing the next deal, always talking about expansion. He wore polo shirts with his company logo embroidered on the chest. He carried 2 phones, one for business and one for personal calls, though the distinction seemed arbitrary. He was on both constantly. Elena and Lianne spoke once or twice a week, sometimes more if something was urgent. The conversations were brief, functional. Lianne often sounded distracted, as if she were scrolling through her phone while talking. Their relationship was not warm, but it was not hostile either. It was the relationship of 2 women who had grown into different versions of themselves and who no longer had much to say beyond logistics and updates. "How are you feeling, Ma?" "Fine." "How is Paolo?" "Busy with school. He has exams next week." "Tell him I said good luck." "I will." And that would be the end of it. Elena did not expect more. She had raised Lianne to be independent, capable, self-sufficient. She had not coddled her. She had not given her everything she asked for. She had taught her that money was earned, not given. That respect was built, not assumed. That family was important, but boundaries were necessary. Lianne had learned those lessons well. Perhaps too well. She had grown into a woman who measured success by visible markers. The house. The car. The school fees. The vacations were posted on social media. She had grown into a woman who feared falling behind, who compared herself constantly to friends and colleagues, who believed that if she did not keep moving forward, she was moving backward. And she had grown into a woman who saw her mother's properties not as the result of decades of work, but as assets that should, eventually, transfer to her. That changed in early March. Elena had gone to the emergency room on a Tuesday night. She had been feeling dizzy for 2 days, her vision occasionally blurring at the edges. She would stand up from the sofa and have to sit back down, waiting for the room to stop tilting. She would walk to the kitchen and lose her balance, catching herself on the counter. She told herself it was nothing. Fatigue. Stress. Too much coffee. But on Tuesday evening, while getting ready for bed, she sat down on the hallway floor outside her unit and could not get back up. Her legs felt weak. Her chest felt tight. The hallway light seemed too bright. A neighbor, Mrs. Lim from Unit 1203 found her sitting there, leaning against the wall, breathing slowly. "Elena, are you all right?" Mrs. Lim asked, kneeling down. "I just need a moment," Elena said. "No," Mrs. Lim said firmly. "I am taking you to the hospital." Elena did not argue. She recognized the seriousness in Mrs. Lim's voice. She let herself be helped to her feet, let herself be guided to the elevator, let herself be driven to the nearest hospital. The emergency room was crowded. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs. The smell of antiseptic and old air conditioning. Elena sat quietly while nurses took her blood pressure, checked her heart rate, and asked her questions about her medical history. The blood pressure reading was high. Very high. The doctor, a young woman with tired eyes and a calm voice, ordered tests. An electrocardiogram. Blood work. Monitoring overnight. "We need to make sure it is not something more serious," the doctor said. Elena nodded. "I understand." They admitted her to a ward, a semi-private room with 2 beds. The other bed was empty. Elena changed into a hospital gown, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. An 4 drip was attached to her arm. Monitors beeped softly beside her. The curtains around the bed were thin and pale green. She called Lianne from the hospital phone. "Ma?" Lianne answered on the 4th ring, her voice distracted. "I am in the hospital," Elena said calmly. "They are keeping me overnight for observation. My blood pressure was high." There was a pause. Then Lianne's voice sharpened, focused. "Which hospital?" Elena told her. "I will be there in the morning," Lianne said. "Do you need anything now?" "No," Elena said. "I am fine. Just letting you know." "Okay," Lianne said. "Try to rest." Elena hung up and lay back against the pillows. The room was quiet except for the beeping monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital at night. She closed her eyes, but she did not sleep. She thought about her blood pressure, about the dizziness, about how quickly the body could betray you, how a heart that had beaten steadily for 62 years could suddenly decide to falter. She thought about her properties, about her savings, about what would happen if something serious was wrong. And she thought about Lianne, who had asked which hospital, but had not asked how Elena was feeling. The next morning, Lianne arrived at 7:30 with a small bag of clothes and a Tupperware container of luga, rice porridge with chicken and ginger. She sat beside the bed, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to ask if Elena needed anything. "How are you feeling?" she asked, but her eyes were on the screen. "Better," Elena said. "Good," Lianne said. "The doctor said they are adjusting your medication." "Yes." Lianne took photos of the prescription list with her phone, zooming in on the dosages and instructions. She asked the nurse 3 questions about medication timing, wrote the answers down in her phone's notes app, and then returned to scrolling. When the discharge papers came in the late morning, Lianne read them carefully, more carefully than Elena had expected. She highlighted sections with her finger, asked the nurse to clarify 2 terms, and took more photos. "You scared me, Ma," she said, not looking up from the papers. Elena nodded. "I am fine now." "Still," Lianne said, "we need to be more careful." They left the hospital together. Lianne drove Elena home, helped her up to the 12th floor, unlocked the condo door, and settled her on the sofa. "Rest," she said. "I will come back tomorrow with groceries." "You do not need to," Elena said. "Yes, I do," Lianne said. And she left. Elena sat on the sofa, looking around her condo. Everything was as she had left it. The glass table, the bookshelf, the view of the highway. But something felt different. Something had shifted. She could not name it yet, but she felt it in the air, in the way Lianne had read the discharge papers so carefully, in the way she had photographed everything, in the way she had said, "We need to be more careful." As if Elena's health had become a shared concern. As if Elena's life had become something that needed management. 2 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, Lianne showed up at Elena's condo with 2 bags of groceries and a color-coded pill organizer. She unpacked the groceries methodically, placing items in the refrigerator and the cupboards according to some system Elena did not recognize. She threw away expired condiments, jars of peanut butter and bottles of soy sauce that had been sitting in the back of the cupboard for months. She wiped down the shelves with a damp cloth. She rearranged the canned goods, labels facing forward. Then she moved to the pill organizer. It was plastic, divided into 7 compartments, each labeled with a day of the week. Lianne filled each compartment carefully, reading the prescription bottles, counting pills, double-checking dosages. She wrote the day of the week on each compartment in neat block letters with a black marker. "There," she said, stepping back. "Now you will not forget." Elena watched her daughter move through the kitchen with a kind of brisk efficiency that felt rehearsed, as if she had practiced this routine before, as if she had imagined this moment and was now executing it exactly as planned. "Thank you," Elena said. "No problem," Lianne said. "You just need to be more organized." She washed her hands, dried them on a towel, and looked around the condo one more time. "Do you need anything else?" she asked. "No," Elena said. "Okay," Lianne said. "I will call you tomorrow." When she left, the condo was quiet and strangely neat, like a hotel room waiting for the next guest. The refrigerator was full. The cupboards were organized. The pill organizer sat on the counter, labeled and ready. Elena stood in the kitchen, looking at the organizer. It was thoughtful. It was practical. But something about the way Lianne had moved through the space, opening drawers, checking cabinets, scanning the counters, made Elena uneasy. She could not name it yet, but she felt it. It was the feeling of being assessed, of being inventoried, of having someone take stock of your life and decide what needed to be managed. That night, Elena sat at the glass table and looked at the pill organizer. The city outside was loud, as always. Traffic. Horns. The distant sound of construction that never seemed to stop. She took her evening pills, drank a glass of water, and went to bed. But she did not sleep well. She kept thinking about the way Lianne had opened the cupboards, checked the expiration dates, rearranged everything. She kept thinking about the way Lianne had photographed the prescription list, as if she needed her own record, her own documentation. She kept thinking about the word we. We need to be more careful. As if Elena's life had become a project Lianne was managing. 2 days after that, on a Saturday afternoon, Lianne came back. This time, she carried a navy blue folder, thick and heavy, the kind used for legal documents or contracts. She sat down at the same glass table, placed the folder between them, and began to talk. Her tone was gentle, concerned, the tone of someone who is about to ask for something difficult but necessary. "Ma, listen," she began, folding her hands on top of the folder. "I have been thinking a lot about what happened. About you going to the hospital. About your health." Elena poured tea into 2 cups, one for herself and one for Lianne. She kept her face calm. "I talked to a friend who works in insurance," Lianne continued. "Someone I met through work. And she said that with your blood pressure and your age, we need to think ahead. We need to make sure everything's in order." "What do you mean by everything?" Elena asked. "Your properties. Your accounts. Your beneficiaries," Lianne said. "This is just to make sure if anything happens, I do not get buried in paperwork. You remember what it was like with Papa. The estate process took forever. We were running around for months, getting signatures, filing documents, waiting for approvals." Elena remembered. She had been the one running around, actually. Lianne had been busy with her new job, her new husband, her new life. Elena had handled most of it alone. "This is different," Lianne said. "This is just insurance. Beneficiary designations. Coverage details. Nothing complicated. My friend already prepared everything. All you need to do is sign." She slid the folder toward Elena, but did not open it. Elena noticed that. She noticed the way Lianne's fingers rested on the edge of the folder, not moving, as if she were guarding something. She noticed the way Lianne's eyes stayed on her face, not on the documents. She noticed the way Lianne spoke about her friend as if that gave the documents authority, credibility, trustworthiness. "You do not need to read everything now," Lianne continued. "I already highlighted the parts that need your signature. My friend said it is better to do this while you are healthy. That way, there are no issues later. No delays. No complications." Elena reached for the folder, but Lianne did not let go immediately. For a moment, their hands were both on it, and Elena felt the slight tension in her daughter's grip. "You trust me, right?" Lianne asked, trying to make it sound light, almost joking. Elena smiled. Of course. She pulled the folder toward her and rested her hand on top of it. But I will read it slowly tonight, she said. My eyes get tired easily now. The doctor said I should not strain them. Lianne's face shifted, just a little. A tightness around the mouth. A flicker in the eyes. A quick breath. Sure, Ma, she said. Take your time. But not too much time. My friend needs it back by next week. She is doing this as a favor. I understand, Elena said. I will read it this weekend. Lianne stood, picking up her purse from the back of the chair. Okay, she said. Just call me if you have questions. But honestly, it is very straightforward. Just sign where I marked. She kissed Elena's cheek quickly and left. When the door closed, Elena sat at the table for a long time, looking at the folder. Outside, the city noise continued, muffled by the glass. The air conditioner clicked on with its familiar hum. The light from the window made the folder look darker than it was, the navy blue almost black in the afternoon shadow. Elena did not open it right away. She finished her tea. She washed both cups. She wiped the table. She walked to the window and looked out at the highway, at the cars moving in their endless stream, at the buildings rising in the distance. And then, when the condo was very quiet, she sat down again, turned on the lamp, adjusted her reading glasses, and opened the folder. The first page looked normal enough. It was a form, neatly typed, professional. At the top, in bold letters, Beneficiary Designation and Asset Transfer Agreement. Elena read the title twice. Asset Transfer. She read further. Her name was there. Elena Santos Morales. Her address. Her date of birth. Standard fields, neatly filled in. But by the second page, Elena began to notice things. The word assets appeared 3 times in the first paragraph. The phrase beneficial ownership was printed in bold halfway down the page. There were references to assignor and assignee, terms she recognized from corporate documents, from employment contracts, from the kinds of agreements companies used when transferring liability or restructuring ownership. Not terms you saw in insurance policies. On the third page, she saw property descriptions. Lot 43, Block 7, Quezon City. That was one of her rental condos. Lot 18, Block 12, Pasig. That was her commercial unit. And further down, Family Residence, Bulacan Province, title number. That was the house. Elena stopped reading and closed the folder. She sat very still, her hands resting on top of the navy blue cover. Her heart was beating steadily. Her breathing was calm. But her mind was moving fast, sorting through possibilities, checking the language against everything she had ever learned about contracts and liability. She opened the folder again and turned to the 4th page. Halfway down, in smaller print, a clause read, Assignor hereby irrevocably waives all claims and defenses related to the transferred obligations and acknowledges full understanding of all liabilities associated with the designated entities. Elena read it 3 times. Irrevocably waives all claims. Transferred obligations. Liabilities associated with the designated entities. This was not insurance. This was a transfer. She turned to the 5th page. There, in a section titled Corporate Structure and Beneficiary Entity, she saw a name she did not recognize. LRM Holdings, Incorporated. Registered address, Quezon City. Date of incorporation, January 15, 2021. 2 months ago. LRM. Lianne R. Morales. Her daughter's initials. Elena closed the folder again and stood up. She walked to her bedroom, placed the folder on her bedside table, and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her phone. There were already 3 missed calls from Lianne, all within the last hour. And 4 text messages. Have you had a chance to skim? Just sign the flags, Ma. It is really simple. My friend needs it back by Friday. Call me when you are done. Elena set the phone down, face up, and watched the screen go dark. She did not call back that night. Instead, she walked to her closet and opened the bottom drawer, the one she kept locked with a small key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside were her important documents. Her passport. Her birth certificate. her marriage certificate, the deed to this condo. And beneath those, in clear plastic sleeves organized by date, every document related to her late husband's estate. She pulled out the estate file and brought it to the bed. For the next 2 hours, Elena read through the old documents, refreshing her memory. She remembered the process, the lawyers, the paperwork, the clauses that had almost trapped her until Attorney Ramos caught them. She remembered one document in particular, a transfer agreement from Roberto's business partner, a man who had tried to assign debts to Roberto's estate posthumously. The language had been nearly identical to what she was seeing now. Irrevocably waives. Transferred obligations. Full understanding of liabilities. Back then, Attorney Ramos had caught it. He had explained it to her carefully, patiently, as if she were a student learning a difficult lesson. They are trying to move a problem, he had said. They are trying to make Roberto's estate responsible for debts he did not create. If you sign this, you inherit the debt. Elena had not signed. She had fought it. It had taken months. But she had won. Now, looking at Lianne's folder, she saw the same structure. Someone was trying to solve a problem. And that someone was her daughter. The next morning, Friday, Lianne called before 8. Elena answered on the third ring. Ma, did you look at the forms? Lianne's voice was tight, controlled, the voice of someone trying very hard to sound casual. Not yet, Elena said. I will read them this weekend. Ma, I really need them back by today, Lianne said. My friend has a deadline. Can you just sign them now? I can come pick them up. I want to read everything first, Elena said calmly. A small silence. Why? Lianne asked. You trust me, do you not? Of course, Elena said. But I still want to read. Another pause, longer this time. Elena could hear something in the background on Lianne's end. Marco's voice, distant, asking a question. Okay, Ma, Lianne said finally. But do not take too long. This is important. I understand, Elena said. She hung up and looked at the navy folder on her bedside table. Then she picked up her phone again and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Attorney Rogelio Ramirez. She had not spoken to him in over a year, but he had been her lawyer since Roberto's death. He was 68 now, semi-retired, and officially no longer taking new clients. But Elena knew he still kept a small office in Ortigas, a one-room space above a bakery where he met with old clients and reviewed documents for people he trusted. She pressed the number. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and a little surprised. Elena, he said. It has been a while. How are you? I am well, she said. But I need your help. Of course, he said. What is wrong? Elena chose her words carefully. I need you to look at some documents, she said. I think someone is trying to move my properties. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Attorney Ramos's voice changed, became sharper, more focused. Who? He asked. Elena hesitated. My daughter, she said quietly. Another silence, longer this time. Then Attorney Ramos said, Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Yes, Elena said. Good, he said. 10 o'clock. The usual place. Bring everything. We will go through it together. Thank you, Elena said. Elena, Attorney Ramos said before she could hang up. Do not sign anything until we talk. I will not, she said. She hung up and looked out the window. The city stretched below her, gray and crowded and indifferent. The morning light was harsh, unforgiving. The traffic was already building. She felt something shift inside her, a small, precise movement. Don't panic. Not anger. Just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop hoping for the best and start preparing for the worst. The cafe was in Ortigas on the third floor of an old building near Attorney Ramos's former law office. It was a small place, family-owned, with only 6 tables and a counter where the owner's wife made sandwiches and brewed coffee throughout the day. The walls were painted pale yellow. The air conditioning was strong, almost too strong. The lighting was soft, from old bulbs hanging in simple fixtures. It was the kind of place where people could talk without being overheard, where the owner knew better than to hover near tables, where privacy was an unspoken courtesy. Elena arrived at 9:45 on Saturday morning. She wore simple clothes, a plain white blouse and dark blue pants, the kind of outfit she used to wear to work, professional but unremarkable. She carried the navy folder in an ordinary canvas tote bag, the kind she used for grocery shopping, so that anyone seeing her would think she was just running errands, not consulting a lawyer about family betrayal. She ordered coffee and sat at the table in the far corner, away from the windows. She placed the tote bag on the chair beside her and waited. Attorney Ramos arrived at exactly 10. He was a small man, thin, with white hair combed neatly to the side and glasses that sat low on his nose. He wore a pale blue barong, the fabric crisp and pressed, with subtle embroidery along the chest. He moved slowly, deliberately, with the careful gait of someone whose body had started to betray him, but whose mind remained sharp. When he saw Elena, he smiled and came to the table. "Elena," he said, sitting down across from her. "You look well." "Thank you," she said. He ordered coffee from the owner, who brought it quickly and then retreated behind the counter without asking questions. They waited until they were alone. Then Elena pulled the navy folder from her tote bag and placed it on the table between them. "This is what my daughter gave me," she said. "She said it was insurance." Attorney Ramos adjusted his glasses, opened the folder, and began to read. Elena watched his face as he read, watching for the reactions she knew would come. At first, he looked neutral, scanning the pages the way a lawyer scans any document, checking formatting, headings, structure. He flipped through the first page, the second, the third. But by the fourth page, his expression changed. His mouth tightened. His eyes narrowed slightly. He flipped back to the second page, then forward to the fifth, then back again. He pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and began marking the margins, underlining phrases, circling words. When he finally looked up, his face was calm, but his voice was very serious. "This is not insurance," he said. Elena nodded. "I know." He laid the folder open on the table, turning it so she could see the pages he was referencing. "This is a transfer of beneficial interest," he said, tapping the second page with his pen. "Your properties are being assigned to a holding company. Here. LRM Holdings, Incorporated. Do you know this company?" "No," Elena said. "But I can guess who registered it." "The initials match your daughter's name," Attorney Ramos said. "Lianne R. Morales." "Yes," Elena said. He turned to another page, further into the document. "And here," he said, pointing to a clause halfway down page 6, "this is an assumption of liabilities." Very specific language. It transfers not just the properties, but also any debts or obligations tied to them. "Do you have any outstanding liabilities attached to these properties?" Elena took a breath. "There was a Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment," she said. "For years ago. You helped me with it. We fought some of it. We set up a payment plan." Attorney Ramos frowned, thinking. "The development company issue," he said slowly. "The one with the careless accountant." "Yes," Elena said. He reached into his briefcase, a worn leather case he had carried for decades, and pulled out a thin file folder. Inside were photocopies of old correspondence, assessment notices, payment records. He found what he was looking for and placed it on the table. It was a Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment notice addressed to Elena Santos Morales, dated October 20, 2017. The amount due, including penalties and interest, was listed at the bottom. 23 million pesos. At current conversion rates, roughly $500,000. Elena looked at the number and felt the weight of it settle in her chest, but her face stayed calm. "We managed to fight part of it," Attorney Ramos said quietly. "And we stretched the payment schedule over several years. But the total liability is still there. You have been paying it down slowly." "Yes," Elena said. "I still have 3 years left on the plan." "And if you sign these documents?" Attorney Ramos asked, gesturing to the navy folder. "What happens?" Elena asked. "You assign your properties to LRM Holdings," he said. "And you assign the tax liability along with them. Then, with one more document, likely prepared separately, your daughter becomes the sole director and shareholder of the company. She controls the properties. But the liability stays attached to the properties and to the company." He paused, watching her closely. "Depending on how she structures things after that," he continued, She could potentially move the properties out of the company again and leave the liability behind. Or she could try to shield herself personally and let the bureau come after you directly, since you were the original debtor. Elena stirred her coffee slowly. The spoon clicked against the cup, steady and rhythmic. So right now, she said carefully, she thinks she is taking the properties and leaving me with the tax problem. Yes, Attorney Ramos said. Or she thinks she is taking both and then figuring out a way to deal with the bureau later. But she has not told me about the tax liability, Elena said. She is calling this insurance. Which means, Attorney Ramos said, she either does not understand what she has prepared, or she is deliberately hiding it from you. Elena took a sip of her coffee. It was strong and a little bitter, but she did not add sugar. Is there a way, she asked, keeping her voice steady, to let her have exactly what she prepared for me, but properly documented, fully legal, with my other assets protected? Attorney Ramos did not answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses, and wiped them slowly with a small cloth he kept in his pocket. He looked at Elena for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, just a little, the tired, knowing smile of a man who had seen too many families destroy themselves over land and money and fear. There might be, he said. But it will take precision. And time. And you need to be absolutely certain this is what you want to do. What do you mean? Elena asked. I mean, Attorney Ramos said that what you are describing is a reversal. You want her to receive exactly what she tried to give you. The liability. The responsibility. The burden. But you also want everything legal, documented, so she cannot claim later that she did not know. Yes, Elena said. That requires planning, he said. First, we protect what we can. We move your other assets into a structure she cannot touch. A trust, most likely. Second, we prepare documents that mirror what she has given you, but with full disclosure of the liabilities. Everything is transparent. Everything is legal. Third, we let her sign. And once she signs, it is done. She owns the problem. Elena listened carefully. Will it work? She asked. If we do it correctly, yes, Attorney Ramos said. But you need to understand something. This will change your relationship with your daughter permanently. She will know what you did. And she will not forgive you easily. I understand, Elena said. Are you sure? He asked. Because once we start, we cannot undo it halfway. And if you hesitate at the wrong moment, everything falls apart. Elena thought about Lianne. About the hospital. About the pill organizer. About the way her daughter had reorganized her kitchen as if Elena could no longer manage her own life. She thought about the folder sitting between them, about the clauses designed to strip her of everything she had built. She thought about the word insurance, about the way it had been used to hide the truth. And she thought about what her husband would have said if he were still alive. Read every page, Elena. Never sign what you have not read. I am sure, Elena said. Attorney Ramos put his glasses back on and nodded. Then we will need to move carefully, he said. And quickly. How much time do we have before she expects the documents back? She wants them by next Friday, Elena said. Then we start today, Attorney Ramos said. Over the next 5 months, from March to August 2021, Elena Morales became a woman with a plan. Her days, which had once been slow and predictable, became structured around meetings, research, and careful preparation. She moved through her life as she always had, calm and unremarkable, but underneath the surface, she was building something precise, something that would protect her and redirect the trap her daughter had set. She told Lianne she was reading the documents slowly, taking her time, asking friends for advice. She delayed. She made excuses. She claimed her eyes were tired, that she needed to consult someone, that she wanted to understand everything before signing. Lianne grew impatient, but Elena stayed calm. Ma, this is not complicated, Lianne said on one of her phone calls. Just sign. You are overthinking it. I will sign when I am ready, Elena replied. And she did not sign. Instead, she met with Attorney Ramos twice a week, every Monday and Wednesday afternoon, in his small office above the bakery in Ortigas. The office was simple, Just one room with a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and shelves filled with law books and case files. The window overlooked a busy street. The sound of traffic and construction drifted up constantly. Attorney Ramos had brought in a young associate, a woman named Attorney Liza Cruz, who worked with him on selective cases. She was in her early 40s, sharp and precise, with short hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She specialized in estate planning and corporate structures. Together, the three of them began to build Elena's defense. The first step was creating a revocable living trust. A trust allows you to transfer ownership of your properties without losing control, Attorney Cruz explained, sitting across from Elena at the small desk. You become the trustee, which means you manage the properties during your lifetime. After your death, a successor trustee takes over and distributes the assets according to your wishes. And my daughter cannot touch the trust? Elena asked. Not if we structure it correctly, Attorney Cruz said. The trust owns the properties. You manage the trust. When you die, the beneficiary inherits. In this case, your grandson. What about before I die? Elena asked. Can she challenge it? She can try, Attorney Ramos said. But if the trust is properly documented, properly funded, and properly managed, it will hold up. Especially if we make it clear that the transfer was made voluntarily, with full mental capacity, and with legal advice. Elena nodded. Let us do it. Over the following weeks, they drafted the trust document. It was simple and clean, written in plain language wherever possible, with clear provisions for how the properties would be managed and distributed. The beneficiary after Elena's death would be Paulo, her grandson, but with conditions. He would have to finish his education. He would have to stay out of serious legal trouble. And he would have to reach the age of 25 before gaining full control of the properties. Until then, the trust would be managed by a neutral third party, a financial consultant named Mr. Ernesto Navarro, whom Attorney Ramos had worked with for years. Why 25? Elena asked. Because by then, he will be mature enough to handle the responsibility, Attorney Ramos said. And old enough that no one can claim he was unduly influenced. Every property that was not entangled with the tax assessment was listed in the trust. The rental condominium in Quezon City, Lot 43, Block 7. The second rental unit, also in Quezon City, Lot 61, Block 9. The commercial unit in Pasig, Lot 18, Block 12. The family house in Bulacan. Each property was carefully described, with lot numbers, title numbers, and current market values estimated conservatively. The only property not included was Elena's share in the original development company tied to the Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment. That share remained under Elena's name, deliberately, because that was the asset Lianne's documents were targeting. If we move that into the trust, Attorney Ramos explained, she will know something is wrong. And she will pull back. We need her to think everything is proceeding as planned. So I leave the liability under my name, Elena said. For now, Attorney Ramos said. And then we transfer it to her, legally and transparently. Elena agreed. The trust was finalized in early May. Elena signed the documents in Attorney Ramos's office, witnessed by Attorney Cruz and a notary public who came to the office specifically for that purpose. The notary stamped each page with a heavy, official seal, the sound echoing in the small room. Thanks. 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 The trust was now legal. Now real. Now active. But it was not yet funded. Funding the trust meant transferring the properties into the trust's name, which required filing documents with the Registry of Deeds, paying transfer taxes, and updating title records. It was a slow process, bureaucratic and tedious, but necessary. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Elena visited different Registry of Deeds offices, one for Quezon City, one for Pasig, one for Bulacan. She brought the trust documents, the old property titles, and the transfer forms that Attorney Cruz had prepared. She waited in line. She submitted paperwork. She paid fees. She returned weeks later to pick up the updated titles. Each time, the new title showed the same owner, Elena S. Morales Revocable Living Trust. No longer Elena Morales personally. The trust. It took weeks, but by the end of June, all the clean properties were under the trust's name. On Fridays, Elena visited her banks. She had accounts at 3 different banks, accumulated over the years. Some were joint accounts from her marriage, now solely in her name. Some were personal savings accounts. Some held rental income deposits. She went to each bank one by one and explained what she wanted to do. "I am setting up a trust," she said calmly. "I need to open accounts under the trust's name." The bank officers were polite, professional. They asked for documentation. She provided the trust papers, her identification, and her tax identification number. They opened new accounts under the trust. She transferred balances gradually, in amounts just below the threshold that usually triggered automated alerts or phone calls from relationship managers. 50,000 pesos here. 70,000 there. Small enough to avoid attention. Large enough to matter. The tellers knew her. They had seen her for years, always quiet, always polite, always paying bills and making deposits. They did not ask questions beyond standard banking procedures. By the end of July, most of Elena's liquid assets had been quietly repositioned into accounts she controlled, but that were technically owned by the trust. On Saturday mornings, Elena met with an independent tax consultant, a certified public accountant named Mr. Dante Reyes. He was in his 50s, soft-spoken, with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who spent most of his days reviewing spreadsheets and tax codes. His office was small, on the second floor of a building near Cubeo. The walls were lined with filing cabinets. The desk was covered with calculators, ledgers, and stacks of folders labeled with company names and case numbers. Elena brought him the old Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment, the payment records, and copies of Lianne's documents. She explained the situation carefully, leaving nothing out. Mr. Reyes read everything slowly, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is tied to your share in the original development company," he explained, pointing to a line in the assessment. The company developed a subdivision project in 2015. The accountant failed to file certain tax returns on time. The Bureau assessed penalties, interest, and back taxes. "And I am responsible because I was a shareholder," Elena said. "Yes," Mr. Reyes said. "You owned 40% of the company. So you are liable for 40% of the total assessment." "And if I transfer my shares to someone else?" Elena asked. "Then the new shareholder becomes responsible," Mr. Reyes said. "As long as the transfer is documented, disclosed to the Bureau, and filed properly. The liability follows the shares." "What if the new shareholder claims they did not know about the assessment?" Elena asked. "That is why disclosure is critical," Mr. Reyes said. "If the transfer documents clearly state the existence of the tax liability, and if the new shareholder signs those documents, they cannot claim ignorance later." Elena made notes. She asked questions. She wanted to understand every detail, every clause, every possible complication. Mr. Reyes explained how the liability was calculated, how the Bureau enforced collection, how payment plans worked, and how corporate structures could be used to shield or expose individual shareholders. "Your daughter's plan," Mr. Reyes said carefully, "is to take your properties and leave you with the debt. Or to take both and then restructure later to protect herself. Can she do that legally?" Elena asked. "If you sign her documents without full disclosure, yes," Mr. Reyes said. "But if we prepare documents with full disclosure, and she signs them, then she owns the debt." "And I am protected," Elena said. "Yes," Mr. Reyes said. "As long as we do this correctly." At home, Elena created a meticulous paper trail. Every text message from Lianne about the insurance forms, she backed up and printed. She took screenshots of their exchanges and saved them in a digital folder on her laptop, organized by date. She printed physical copies and placed them in a clear binder, labeled Correspondence, Lianne, March-August 2021. The messages formed a pattern. "Ma, sign those so I do not get stuck later. We will move the titles now para clear na. Trust me, this is for your protection. My friend is waiting. She needs the documents. You are overthinking this." Elena also kept a handwritten journal, a small notebook where she recorded every conversation, every meeting, every detail. She wrote in simple, factual language. March 13th, Lianne brought a folder, called it insurance. March 18th, Attorney Ramos confirmed the documents are transfer, not insurance. April 2nd, trust drafted. May 15th, trust signed and notarized. June 20th, QC properties transferred to trust. She did not write about her feelings. She did not write about betrayal or anger. She wrote only facts, dates, times, names. Because facts could be verified. Facts could be defended in court if necessary. One afternoon in early June, Elena deliberately misplaced the navy folder Lianne had given her. Lianne called, asking if Elena had signed yet. I cannot find it, Elena said calmly. Maybe I put it with the electric bills. Lianne sounded irritated, frustrated. Ma, I need those documents. I will keep looking, Elena said. No, forget it, Lianne said sharply. I will bring a new set. Can I come by tomorrow? Not tomorrow, Elena said. I have a doctor's appointment. Maybe next week. Ma, this is urgent, Lianne said. Next week, Elena repeated. Fine, Lianne said. She brought a new set of documents the following week. They were identical to the first set, printed on the same kind of paper, with the same sticky flags marking the signature lines. Elena thanked her, promised to read them, and placed them in the same drawer where the original set was already hidden. The delay gave Attorney Ramos and Attorney Cruz more time. By mid-July, the trust was fully funded. Elena's home condominium, her rental units, and the commercial space were all registered under the trust's name. The bank accounts were transferred. The assets were protected. The only thing left directly under Elena's name was her share in the development company tied to the tax debt. That was the asset Lianne wanted. And that was the asset Elena would give her. In late July, Attorney Cruz drafted a new set of documents. They looked almost identical to Lianne's version. Same page count. Same general headings. Same placement of signature lines. Even the font was matched. But the substance was different. In their version, the transfer of shares in LRM Holdings, Incorporated was complete and irrevocable. The documents included full disclosure of the existing Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment. The liability was listed explicitly, with the case number, the amount owed, and the payment schedule. There was a clause stating that the new shareholder understood and accepted full responsibility for the tax debt. There was no ambiguity. No hidden language. No way for Lianne to claim later that she did not know. The documents also included a notarized affidavit from Elena, stating that she understood the tax obligation and was transferring it, along with the corporate shares, to her daughter, who would assume full responsibility as the new director and shareholder of LRM Holdings. This is what she wanted, Attorney Ramos said, reviewing the final draft. Control of the company. Control of your properties. Except the properties are already in the trust. So she will only get company. And the debt. Will it hold up in court? Elena asked. Absolutely, Attorney Ramos said. Everything is disclosed. Everything is legal. Everything is documented. If she signs this, she cannot claim later that she did not know. The proof is right there in her own signature. And if she refuses to sign? Elena asked. Then we know her intentions, Attorney Ramos said. And you keep the status quo. But I do not think she will refuse. She thinks she is getting your properties. She will not read carefully enough to realize they are already gone. Attorney Cruz nodded. People see what they expect to see. Elena looked at the documents spread out on the desk in Attorney Ramos's small office. The light from the window was warm, golden, the late afternoon sun filtering through the buildings. The fan above them turned slowly, barely stirring the air. Are you sure about this? Attorney Cruz asked, her pen hovering over the final page. Elena thought about her daughter. About the hospital. About the pill organizer. About the way Lianne had reorganized her kitchen, her cupboards, her life. She thought about the Navy folder, about the clauses designed to strip her of everything. She thought about the word insurance, about the way it had been used to deceive her. And she thought about Paulo, her grandson, who would one day inherit what she had built, who would learn from this, who would grow up knowing that contracts mattered, that words had meaning, that protection required vigilance. I am sure, Elena said. They filed draft copies of the documents with the Securities and Exchange Commission on August 5th, pending the signed originals. They prepared disclosure letters for the Bureau of Internal Revenue, ready to be submitted once the transfer was complete. Everything was in place. Elena kept Lianne's original Navy folder in the bottom drawer of her bedside table, locked away with her other important papers. She kept their version, the one that would actually be signed, in a plain brown envelope in the kitchen cabinet, behind the rice cooker. On a rainy morning in mid-September, Lianne called again. Her voice was tense, impatient. "Ma, we really need to finalize those papers," she said. "There is a deadline. My friend has been very patient, but she cannot wait any longer." "Yes," Elena said calmly. "Let us do it properly. At the bank. With a notary. So everything is legal." There was a pause, then a small exhale of relief. Finally, Lianne said, laughing a little, "I will schedule it. This week." "Thursday afternoon works for me," Elena said. "Perfect," Lianne said. "I will text you the address. Bring the documents." "I will," Elena said. She hung up and looked at the brown envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, the one containing their version of the documents, the version with full disclosure, the version that would give Lianne exactly what she had tried to give Elena. Elena felt calm, steady, clear. She had read every word. She had consulted experts. She had protected what mattered most. Now, all she had to do was let her daughter sign the truth. Thursday arrived with heavy clouds and the threat of rain that Manila always carried in September. Elena woke early at 5:30, the way she had woken every morning for 40 years. She made coffee, black and strong, and sat at the glass table, looking out at the city. The streets below were already crowded with early morning traffic. The light was flat, colorless, the kind of light that made everything look tired. She dressed carefully, deliberately. A simple gray blouse, buttoned to the collar. Dark blue pants, pressed. No jewelry except for the small silver watch Roberto had given her on their 20th anniversary. She tied her hair back in a low ponytail, neat and severe. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who had made a decision. At 11 in the morning, she placed the brown envelope in her canvas tote bag, the same bag she had used when meeting Attorney Ramos for the first time. She checked her wallet, her phone, her keys. She stood by the door for a moment, looking back at her condo, at the glass table, at the view of the highway, at the life she had built and protected. Then she left. The bank was in Bonifacio Global City, on the ground floor of a tall glass building near the Central Plaza. The building was new, modern, all clean lines and reflective surfaces. Inside, the air was cool and sterile. The floor was polished marble, so clean it reflected the ceiling lights. There were rows of teller windows, a waiting area with cushioned chairs, and a small office in the corner where notarial services were offered. Elena arrived first at 1:15. She checked in with the receptionist, a young woman in a crisp uniform who smiled professionally and directed her to a table near the notary's office. Elena sat down, placed her tote bag on the floor beside her, and waited. She watched the entrance, watching for Lianne. At 1:30, Lianne arrived. She wore a beige dress, tailored and professional, the kind of dress worn to business meetings and client presentations. Her hair was tied back neatly. She carried a large leather handbag, expensive, with gold hardware. Her husband, Marco, trailed behind her, checking his phone as always. Marco was tall, in his mid-40s, with the distracted air of someone whose mind was perpetually elsewhere, calculating, planning, strategizing. He wore dark pants and a company polo shirt, blue with his logistics company logo embroidered on the chest. "Ma," Lianne said, bending down to kiss Elena's cheek. Her lips were cool, her perfume expensive. "Sorry we are late. Traffic was terrible." Marco kissed Elena's other cheek quickly, barely pausing, his eyes already back on his phone. "Hi, Ma," he said automatically. "How are you feeling?" "I am fine," Elena said. Lianne sat down across from Elena. Marco took the seat beside her, still scrolling through messages or emails or deals. "Did you bring the folder?" Lianne asked, her voice tight with anticipation. I brought the papers, Elena said. Lianne did not notice the difference in wording. Elena reached into her tote bag and pulled out the brown envelope. She placed it on the table between them. Lianne took it immediately, her hands moving quickly. She opened the envelope, pulled out the stack of papers, and flipped through them, scanning for the yellow sticky flags she had placed on her original version. They were there, in the same positions, marking the same signature lines. Just sign where I marked, Lianne said, pushing the stack toward Elena without really looking at the content. It is exactly what we discussed. Elena put on her reading glasses, the simple wire-framed ones she had worn for years. She picked up the pen the notary had left on the table, a standard black ballpoint. And then, slowly, deliberately, she began to read. Ma, you do not need to read everything, Lianne said, her voice impatient. We already went through this. You know what it says. I want to be sure, Elena said calmly, not looking up. Lianne exhaled sharply, glancing at Marco. He looked up from his phone, shrugged slightly, and went back to scrolling. Elena read each clause. She traced the words with her eyes, even though she had already memorized every sentence, every comma, every period. Page 1. Identification and agreement to transfer. Page 2. Transfer of shares in LRM Holdings, Incorporated. Full ownership. Sole directorship. Immediate effect. Page 3. Property descriptions. But these descriptions were different from what Lianne expected. They referenced only Elena's share in the old development company. Not the rental condos. Not the commercial unit. Not the house. Page 4. Assumption of all liabilities, including but not limited to Bureau of Internal Revenue Assessment Case Number BR, NCR, 2017-004782, total amount 23 million pesos. Page 5. Full disclosure clause. The assignee acknowledges and accepts full knowledge of the tax liability and agrees to assume all responsibility for payment, penalties, and any future obligations arising from said assessment. Page 6. Irrevocable designation of Lianne Morales Santos as sole director and shareholder of LRM Holdings, Incorporated. Page 7. Notarized affidavit of understanding, signed by both parties. Page 8. Acknowledgement of independent legal advice. Everything was there. Everything was transparent. Everything was exactly what Lianne had tried to hide from Elena. The notary, a woman in her 50s with short hair and a tired expression, stepped out of her small office and approached the table. She carried a stamp, a logbook, and her identification card on a lanyard around her neck. Are we ready? She asked, her voice neutral, professional. Yes, Lianne said quickly, too quickly. Elena nodded slowly. Yes. The notary sat down and checked Elena's identification card. She compared the photo to Elena's face, verified the expiration date, and wrote down the details in her logbook. Then she reviewed the documents page by page, checking that all the signature lines were marked, that all the required fields were filled in. Mrs. Morales, the notary said, looking at Elena. Do you understand what you are signing? Yes, Elena said clearly. And you are signing voluntarily? No one is forcing you or coercing you. Yes, I am signing voluntarily, Elena said. And you have had an opportunity to seek independent legal advice? Yes, Elena said. The notary nodded and turned to Lianne. Ms. Santos, she said. Do you understand what you are receiving and accepting through these documents? Lianne nodded quickly. Yes. And you accept all obligations and liabilities associated with the transferred assets? Yes, Lianne said, barely listening, her eyes on the signature lines. The notary stamped the first page. The sound was solid and final, echoing slightly in the quiet bank. Thanks. Elena signed. Her signature was neat, practiced, the same signature she had used on thousands of documents over 40 years. Thanks. Lianne signed as the receiving party and future director of LRM Holdings. Thanks. Marco signed as a witness, still half looking at his phone. Thanks. Each page received the same treatment. Stamp, signature, stamp, signature. 8 pages. 8 stamps. 8 signatures. When it was done, the notary collected the documents, placed them in a folder labeled with the bank's logo, and handed the folder to Lianne. You will receive certified copies in the mail within 2 weeks, the notary said. The originals will be filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Bureau of Internal Revenue within 5 business days. Thank you, Lianne said, smiling now a wide, relieved smile. She stood, zipped the folder into her large handbag, and tucked it under her arm like a trophy. That is it? Marco asked, looking up finally. That is it, Elena said. Good, Marco said. We need to go. I have a meeting at 3-inch. Outside, by the parking lot, Lianne turned to Elena. The rain was starting, light drops that felt warm against the skin. The sky was dark gray, heavy with clouds. Thank you, Ma, Lianne said, her smile too bright, too wide. I know this was hard, but it is better this way. Everything is protected now. You do not have to worry about anything. Elena nodded. Yes. I will call you next week, Lianne said. We should have lunch. Celebrate. Sure, Elena said. Lianne and Marco walked toward their car, the white SUV parked near the entrance. Lianne still held the folder tightly under her arm, protecting it from the rain. Elena stood by the bank entrance, watching them go. She did not move until their car pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the traffic. Then she walked slowly to the street, hailed a taxi, and went home. What Lianne did not know, what she would not know for several more weeks, was this. The documents she now carried, the documents she had signed without reading carefully, had been filed in draft with the Securities and Exchange Commission 2 days earlier, pending the signed originals. The disclosures to the Bureau of Internal Revenue were prepared and ready to be submitted. The trust documents transferring Elena's properties to a structure Lianne could not touch sat safely in attorney Ramos's office and in a fireproof box under Elena's bed. 3 weeks later, LRM Holdings, Incorporated would officially show Lianne Morales Santos as sole shareholder and director, with full, documented notice of existing tax liabilities and obligations totaling 23 million pesos. The properties she thought she was taking from her mother were already in the name of a trust she had no access to and no power over. She had gotten exactly what she had tried to give Elena. Control tied to a $500,000 anchor. And she still did not know who had drafted the final documents. That evening, Elena sat at her glass table and looked out at the city. The rain had stopped. The lights were coming on, one window at a time, scattered across the buildings like stars in a dark sky. She made tea. She placed her cup on the small square of fabric Paulo had stitched in school years ago, the crooked stitches and bright thread faded now but still holding together. She did not feel triumph. She felt tired. But she also felt something else. She felt like herself again. Not because she had won, but because she had protected what mattered. And in the quiet of her condo, as the city hummed below and the night settled in, Elena Morales closed her eyes and breathed. The first sign that Lianne understood something was wrong came in early November, about 7 weeks after the signing. Elena was already in bed, reading a book with the lamp on low, when her phone rang. The screen lit up in the dark room, showing Lianne's name. It was 11 at night. Lianne almost never called this late. Elena answered on the 3rd ring. Ma, Lianne said. Her voice was tight, controlled, but with something underneath, something sharp and dangerous, like water pushing hard against a failing dam. Yes, Elena said, sitting up slowly. Did you know about some Bureau of Internal Revenue thing? Lianne asked. Elena placed her book on the bedside table and turned on the main light. What kind of thing? She asked calmly. An assessment, Lianne said. A tax assessment. They sent a letter to the company office address. The one we used for LRM Holdings. It has my name on it. They're demanding payment. They're asking for documents and financial records and proof of payment history. Elena took a slow breath. Yes, she said. There was an assessment. A pause. A long, heavy pause. And you did not tell me? Lianne's voice rose, the control slipping. I did tell you, Elena said calmly, her voice steady. For years ago. When the assessment first came. When I was setting up the payment plan. You were very busy then, remember? You had just gotten a new job. You said, just handle it, Ma. You said you did not have time for tax problems. That is not the point, Lianne snapped. Why is it under my name now? Why is LRM Holdings listed as the debtor? Elena let the silence sit between them for several seconds. You are the director and shareholder of LRM Holdings, she said quietly. You had papers drafted. You brought them to me. You asked me to sign. We went to the bank. We signed in front of a notary. It is all legal. Everything was disclosed. I thought you were transferring the properties, Lianne said, and for the first time, her voice cracked, just a little. I thought I was getting the condos, the house, the commercial unit. The properties are in a trust, Elena replied. They have been in a trust since May. They are safe. And they will be there for your son when he turns 25. The company you created, LRM Holdings, holds only what you asked it to hold. The shares from the old development company. And the tax liability attached to those shares. You insisted on that structure. I assumed you understood it. Lianne's breathing changed. Elena could hear it through the phone, shallow and fast, the breathing of someone whose carefully constructed plan was collapsing around them. You tricked me, Lianne whispered. Elena shook her head, even though her daughter could not see it. No, Lianne, she said quietly, firmly. You brought me papers designed to take my properties and leave me with your problem. I brought you papers that did exactly what they said they would do, with full disclosure, full transparency, everything legal and documented. You signed them. You did not read them carefully, but you signed them. In front of a notary. In front of witnesses. For a long time, Lianne said nothing. Elena could hear her breathing. Could hear Marco's voice in the background, asking something worried. Then Lianne asked, how much? 23 million pesos, Elena said. About 500,000 US dollars. There is still a payment plan. 3 more years. Quarterly installments. Another silence. So what now? Lianne asked, her voice hollow. Now, Elena said, you talk to a tax lawyer. You continue the payment plan. You make the installments. You decide what kind of person you want to be in front of your son. And you decide whether you want to fix what you broke or keep pretending you are the victim. Lianne let out a small, bitter laugh, the kind of laugh that comes when there is nothing left to say. You are really doing this to your own daughter, she asked. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the years between them. She thought about Lianne as a child, holding her hand at the school gate, asking her to stay just a little longer. She thought about fever nights, sitting by the bedside, wiping Lianne's forehead with a cool cloth. She thought about kindergarten recitals and birthday parties, and the way Lianne used to fall asleep on her shoulder during long car rides. And she thought about the navy folder, about the clauses designed to strip her of everything, about the word insurance, used to hide a trap. No, Elena answered, her voice very quiet. I did this to the woman who put a pen in my hand and hoped I would not notice she was taking everything. I did this to protect myself. And to protect your son. Lianne hung up without saying goodbye. Elena set the phone down on the bedside table and turned off the lamp. The room went dark. The city outside was quiet, or as quiet as Manila ever got. Just the distant hum of traffic and the occasional sound of a car horn, muffled by distance and glass. Elena lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. She did not cry. She did not feel regret. She felt tired. I'm so tired. But also something else. She felt free. Free from the fear that everything she had built could be taken from her. Free from the burden of pretending that family meant trust without boundaries. Free from the weight of protecting people who did not protect her. She closed her eyes and eventually slept. The weeks that followed were quiet. Lianne did not call. She did not visit. She did not text except once, 2 weeks after the late-night call, to say, we found a lawyer. We are working on it. Elena replied, good. Nothing else. Through Paulo, Elena learned pieces of the story. One Saturday, Paulo came to visit Elena alone, taking the bus from Quezon City to Mandaluyong, the way he always did when his parents were too busy to drive him. He was 11 years old, quiet and observant, with his mother's eyes and his grandfather's calm demeanor. He carried a small backpack with his homework and a book he was reading. Elena made him merienda, peanut butter sandwiches and hot chocolate, and they sat at the glass table together. Lola, Paulo said carefully, as if testing the words. Why did we move? Elena looked at him. Move where? We moved to a smaller house, Paolo said. In a different neighborhood. Mama said we have to save money now. Elena nodded slowly. Sometimes families need to adjust. Mama has been sad, Paolo continued. She does not talk much. And Papa sold his car. We only have one car now. Elena placed her hand over his. People make mistakes, Paolo. What matters is what they do after. Paolo nodded, not entirely understanding, but accepting. Lola, he said. Are you mad at Mama? Elena thought about how to answer. I am not mad, she said carefully. But I am disappointed. And I needed to protect myself. From Mama? Paolo asked, his eyes wide. From a bad decision, Elena said gently. Sometimes people we love make bad decisions. And we have to protect ourselves without destroying them. Paolo thought about this, his small face serious. Will you teach me about money, Lola? He asked. So I do not make bad decisions. Elena smiled, the first real smile she had felt in weeks. Yes, she said. When you are ready. When you really want to learn. I want to learn now, Paolo said. And so she began. Over the following months, Elena heard more, piece by piece, about what was happening in Lianne's household. Lianne and Marco had consulted a tax attorney, someone who specialized in Bureau of Internal Revenue disputes. The lawyer had reviewed the assessment, the payment history, and the structure of LRM Holdings. He had explained that the liability was real, documented, and legally transferred to Lianne through the signed documents. Can we fight it? Lianne had asked. Fight what? The lawyer had replied. The assessment has already been contested and partially reduced. The payment plan is already in place. And the transfer documents clearly disclose the liability. You signed them in front of a notary. You cannot claim you did not know. But my mother tricked me, Lianne had insisted. Did she? The lawyer had asked. Because from what I see here, the documents say exactly what they mean. Full disclosure. Full transparency. You just did not read them carefully enough. There was nothing to fight. There was only the debt. Lianne and Marco entered into the existing payment plan, taking over Elena's quarterly installments. The Bureau required immediate proof of payment capacity. They had to provide financial statements, bank records, and proof of income. To make the first payment, which was due in December, they sold Marco's new SUV, the one he had just finished paying off. They sold part of Marco's shares in his logistics company to a business partner. They moved from their 3-bedroom house in the gated subdivision to a smaller rental unit in a less expensive neighborhood. They cut back on everything. No more vacations. No more dinners at expensive restaurants. No more private school for Paolo. He transferred to a good public school nearby. No more new clothes unless absolutely necessary. Lianne stopped posting on social media. Her Facebook account, which had once been filled with photos of family trips and new purchases and carefully curated moments of success, went silent. Marco stopped chasing new contracts and focused on stabilizing what he already had. He cut back his staff. He reduced overhead. He worked longer hours for smaller margins. And Lianne, for the first time in years, had to sit down with a calculator and face the numbers she had been avoiding. She had to look at the quarterly payment amount, 1,500,000 pesos every 3 months. She had to look at their household income and expenses and figure out where the money would come from. She had to learn what her mother had always known, that money was not about how much you earned, but about how carefully you managed what you had. It was a hard lesson, but it was a necessary one. By the middle of 2022, about 1 year after the signing, Elena's life had settled into a new rhythm. The trust sent her a modest, predictable income every month, distributed from the rental properties. It was enough to cover her living expenses, her medication, her utilities, and small luxuries like books and occasional meals at neighborhood restaurants. She did not need more. Her condo was quieter now. Her days were slower. She woke early, made coffee, and sat at the glass table, watching the city wake up below her. She read. She cooked simple meals. She spoke with old friends on the phone, long conversations about nothing important, the kind of conversations that filled time and reminded her she was not alone. Lianne visited once a month, sometimes less. The visits were brief, careful, and measured. They talked about Paolo's schoolwork, Elena's health, and the weather. They did not talk about the documents. They did not talk about the tax payments. They did not talk about what had happened. But the space between them had changed. It was no longer the space of mother and daughter in the way Elena had once understood it. It was the space of two people who had learned something difficult about each other and were still deciding how to live with that knowledge. One Sunday afternoon in March 2022, exactly 1 year after Lianne had first brought the Navy folder, Lianne came to visit with Paolo. She stayed longer than usual, sitting on the sofa instead of perching on the edge as if ready to leave at any moment. Paolo went to the bedroom to work on homework. The two women sat together in the living room, the city noise distant and muffled. "Ma," Lianne said after a long silence. "I need to tell you something." Elena waited. "I spoke to Attorney Ramos last week," Lianne said. Elena's expression did not change, but inside, she felt a small tightening, a wariness. "Why?" she asked. "I wanted to understand the trust," Lianne said. "I wanted to see if there was a way to access it. Or change it. Or add myself as a beneficiary." Elena said nothing. "He told me the trust is irrevocable," Lianne continued, her voice flat. "He told me the properties are locked until Paolo turns 25. He told me there is nothing I can do. That you set it up that way deliberately." "That is correct," Elena said. Lianne looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "I know," she said quietly. "And then I realized something." She paused, her throat working as if the words were hard to say. "You did not just protect yourself," she said. "You protected him. From me." Elena did not deny it. "Yes," she said simply. Lianne's eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She blinked hard, looking away, focusing on the window, on the view of the highway and the buildings. "You were right to do that," she said quietly, the words coming slowly. "I would have taken everything. I would have used it all. I would have spent it, leveraged it, borrowed against it. And then Paolo would have had nothing." Elena reached across the space between them and placed her hand on her daughter's. "You were scared," Elena said gently. "Fear makes people do terrible things. Things they regret. But you were not scared," Lianne said, looking at her mother now. "I was," Elena said. "But I had time to think. And I had people who helped me think clearly. And I had learned a long time ago to read every page before I signed." Lianne nodded slowly, a tear finally escaping, running down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "I am sorry, Ma," she said. Elena squeezed her hand gently. "I know," she said. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past year sitting between them, heavy but no longer crushing. Finally, Lianne said, "We are managing. It is hard, but we are making the payments. We have 2 more years left." "Good," Elena said. "And Paolo," Lianne continued, "he is doing well. He likes his new school. He is learning to budget his allowance. He asked me if I would teach him how to save." Elena smiled. "He asked me the same thing." Lianne laughed, just a little, a small, sad laugh. "Of course he did. He will be all right," Elena said. "He is smart. And he is learning the right lessons." "Because of you," Lianne said. Elena shook her head. "Because of all of us. Even the hard lessons." Before Lianne left that day, she stood at the door and turned back to her mother. "Will you ever trust me again?" she asked, the question hanging in the air like something fragile. Elena thought about this carefully, weighing her words. "I do not know," she said honestly. "Trust is not something I can decide today. But I am willing to see. I am willing to watch. And if you prove, over time, that you have learned, that you have changed, then maybe." Lianne nodded, accepting the answer. "That is fair," she said. "Thank you for not giving up on me completely." "You are still my daughter," Elena said. "I still want you to be happy. I just will not let you destroy yourself. Or me." After Lianne and Paolo left, Elena stood by the window, watching them walk to the parking lot below. She saw Lianne hold Paolo's hand, saw them get into their smaller car, saw them drive away into the evening traffic. She thought about trust. About what it meant. About how it was built, brick by brick, over years. and about how it could be shattered in a moment with one signature, one lie, one betrayal. She did not know if she would ever fully trust Lianne again. But she knew she would try. Because that was what family meant in the end. Not blind faith. Not unconditional forgiveness. But a willingness to see. To watch. To hope. And to protect yourself while you wait. Now, in November 2025, Elena's life continues in its quiet, steady rhythm. She is 65 years old. Her health is stable, managed with medication and regular checkups. Her finances are simple, organized, predictable. Her days follow patterns she has chosen, not patterns forced on her by circumstance or by other people's needs. The trust continues to function smoothly. Mr. Ernesto Navarro, the financial consultant, sends her quarterly reports showing rental income, property maintenance expenses, and the trust's current value. Everything is documented. Everything is transparent. Paulo is now 14 years old, taller, more confident, asking smart questions about money and planning. He visits Elena every Saturday, taking the bus on his own now, proud of his independence. They sit together at the glass table, and Elena teaches him about budgeting, about saving, about the difference between wants and needs. Lola, Paulo said recently, his notebook open in front of him. Why do people borrow money if they cannot pay it back? Elena thought about her answer. Because they believe the future will be better than the present, she said. They believe they will earn more, have more, be more. But the future is not guaranteed. So you should only borrow what you can pay back even if things go wrong. What if you do not borrow at all? Paulo asked. Then you wait, Elena said. You save. You plan. And when you have enough, you buy. That way, you stay free. Paulo wrote this down in his careful handwriting. Stay free, he repeated. Like you, Lola. Elena smiled. Yes, like me. One Saturday in April, Elena took Paulo to the bank and opened a savings account in his name. She deposited 5,000 pesos from the trust, money allocated for educational expenses. She handed him the passbook, a small blue booklet with his name printed neatly on the first page. This is yours, she said. You decide what to do with it. Paulo looked at the passbook, his fingers tracing his name. Can I save it? He asked. You can do whatever you want, Elena said. But think about why you're saving. Think about what you want in 5 years, in 10 years. Make a plan. Paulo nodded seriously. I will think about it. That evening, Paulo told his mother about the account. Lianne called Elena, her voice tight. Ma, why did you open an account for Paulo? She asked. Because he is old enough to learn, Elena said calmly. And because the trust allocates money for his education. I am teaching him how to manage it. You should have asked me first, Lianne said. It is trust money, Elena said. Not yours. Not mine. Hi. I am teaching him how to use it responsibly. There was a long pause. Then Lianne said, okay. But please, Ma. Let me know when you do things like this. I will, Elena said. It was a small step. A small rebuilding. But it was something. By June 2025, Lianne and Marco had reached the final year of the tax payment plan. They had made every quarterly payment on time. The balance was decreasing steadily. They had adjusted to their new life, smaller and simpler, but also more stable. One afternoon, Lianne came to visit Elena alone. She sat at the glass table, where it had all started, and said, Ma, I want to thank you. Elena raised an eyebrow. For what? For teaching me, Lianne said. For stopping me. For making me face what I was doing. Elena said nothing, just waited. I was so scared, Lianne continued. Scared of not having enough. Scared of falling behind. Scared of not being able to give Paulo everything I thought he deserved. And I let that fear make me into someone I am not proud of. She paused, her hands folded on the table. But you stopped me, she said. You did not let me destroy myself. Or you. And I hated you for it. For a long time, I hated you. I know, Elena said quietly. But now, Lianne said, I understand. You were protecting Paulo. You were protecting the future. And you were teaching me, even though I did not want to learn. Elena reached across the table and placed her hand over her daughter's. You are learning now, she said. That is what matters. Lianne nodded, tears in her eyes again, but this time she did not hide them. I am trying, she said. I really am. I know, Elena said. I see it. They sat together in the quiet afternoon light, the city humming below, the air conditioner clicking on softly. And for the first time in years, Elena felt something shift between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer. Understanding. On a Friday evening in late October 2025, as the year approaches its end, Elena sits at her glass table, as she has sat thousands of times before. The city lights are coming on, one window at a time, scattered across the buildings like stars. The traffic is heavy, the usual Friday evening rush. The sky is gray, threatening rain that has not yet come. Elena makes tea, her evening ritual, and places the cup on the small square of fabric polo stitched years ago. The fabric is faded now, the stitch is looser, but it still holds together, still serving its purpose. She thinks about the navy folder, still locked in her bedside drawer. She has not opened it in over a year. She does not need to. She knows what is inside. And she knows it will stay there, reminder of what almost happened, a warning to herself and to anyone who might one day read her story. She thinks about the trust documents stored in the fireproof box under her bed and in Attorney Ramos's office. She reviews them occasionally, more out of habit than worry. They're solid. They are clear. They will protect Paulo long after she is gone. She thinks about Lianne, slowly rebuilding her life, slowly learning the lessons Elena had tried to teach her years ago. She thinks about Marco, working harder now, more focused, more careful. She thinks about Paulo, growing into a young man who asks questions and writes down answers and thinks before he spends. And she thinks about herself, 65 years old, living alone in a modest condo, looking out at a city that never stops moving. She does not regret what she did. She regrets that it was necessary. But life, she has learned, is full of necessary choices. You read the contract. You protect what is yours. You make the hard decisions when no one else will. And when it is done, you close the drawer gently, as if tucking in a child who can finally sleep. The rain begins soft at first, then steady. The windows blur. The lights outside become smudges of yellow and white, soft and distant. Elena sips her tea and watches the rain fall. The city hums below. The air conditioner clicks on. The light fades slowly. And Elena Morales, at 65 years old, sits in her quiet condo and feels something she has not felt in years. She feels safe. She feels whole. She feels like herself again. Not because she won a battle, but because she survived a war. A quiet war, fought with papers and signatures and carefully chosen words. A war that no one saw except the people involved. And in surviving, in protecting what mattered, she had given herself something more valuable than properties or money or revenge. She had given herself peace. The rain continues. The city continues. Life continues. And in the quiet of her condo, as evening becomes night, Elena closes her eyes and breathes. She does not think about what was taken. She does not think about what was saved. She thinks only about what remains. Her life. Her dignity. Her peace. And that, she knows, is more than enough. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.